Hi, I'm Simon Hunt, an author, a consultant, a parent of two delightful children aged 8 and 5, and I'm a teacher at a 3-4 class at the wonderful Tottenham Primary School. Today, I'm delighted to be hosting this TTS Little Lockdowners Learning Question and Answer session, where we'll be exploring ways to close a critical skills gap in primary learners. I'm joined by Dr. Ems Lord, Director of Enrich, who is the University of Cambridge's multiple award-winning outreach mathematics programme. Ems will be offering practical guidance on how to strengthen mathematical skills in primary learners post-pandemic. Can you explain a little bit about yourself, your work and your background, please, Ems?
Hi, Simon. Lovely to be here. Thank you very much for hosting today's event. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. After university, where I studied maths, I decided that I really wanted to do teaching. I'd been on a couple of government courses where you could go into schools during the holidays and teach, and I just caught the bug. So I signed up as a mathematician. I thought, do you know what? I need to go into secondary teaching. So I got the grant, started the course, and the first couple of weeks, they said you need to go into primary schools. So I did that, went into my local primary school, and that was it. I was totally hooked on teaching primary maths and all the opportunities there were for cross-curricular learning and just bringing the subject to life. So I returned my grant. My parents are still getting over the fact that I returned the grant, but we'll get there in the end. I became a primary school teacher, had a fantastic career in the classroom, became a local advisor, so supporting other schools as well with maths. And then the local university got in touch and said, would you like to do some work with us? Which was great. And that included working with TAs who were going into the classroom, trying ideas and coming back to the next session, talking about what they'd done. So that was fantastic. And during the time of that, I started working a little bit with Enrich, which was kind of the dream thing, because when I was teaching, I was always using Enrich resources. So I was incredibly lucky. They appointed me as the director. I've been with the team several years now, and I get to oversee the vision of the team and where we're heading to support mathematics, especially nurturing young mathematicians. So it's kind of the dream job, going from a classroom and using the resources and now heading up the team.
Thanks for joining us, Ems. And I love your resources as well. I use them all the time, and I'll get to that a little bit later on because I've got a very specific question from one of my experts in my classroom. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So what impact do you think the pandemic has had upon maths, in particular primary learners, and where these challenges here pre-pandemic and how have they been sort of exacerbated as it's like how we're coming out the other end?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. And what we're finding talking with teachers is different types of effects. So there's one effect that is felt right across the board, and it's because of the unequal access to mathematics that children have had. I think everybody did their utmost during the pandemic. Families, schools, everyone pulled together to make sure the children had the access to the best possible support they could. But it still varied, and some children were getting regular support and some were getting a lot less. So the children have come back to class, as you know, Simon, with those very different experiences of mathematics and also what mathematics means. So as teachers, we often have a way of delivering our vision for mathematics and our school's vision for mathematics. That may not be the same as at home, and people may have had different experiences. But for a couple of years, we handed that over in the main to families. So there's been that different experience. But we also had issues before the pandemic. So it's not just about the pandemic when we're thinking of going forward with primary maths. The existing issues were very much about those three aims, which you and I will know so well for primary maths. You know, three aims of our curriculum is work on fluency, reasoning, and problem solving. And as a mathematician, I couldn't ask for three better aims. We want the children to be able to be confident with their numbers. We want them to be able to solve unfamiliar problems and reason and work out their answers. So that's great. But when we look at Ofsted reports, even from several years ago, they talk consistently about the lack of problem solving in schools and it being unequal sometimes between classes. So you might have a teacher who's very confident, there's a lot of problem solving, and then the children may go to a classroom where they don't have that experience. So we've got these two things going on. We've got a lack of problem solving, and then during the pandemic, when there was more homeschooling, Perhaps with parents who are less confident, that dropped even further. And then the other thing that we're facing is the uneven experiences of even the fluency. So they are big challenges, but one thing I do know talking with primary teachers is they're making great strides in addressing them. And I think it's fantastic the whole way the primary community is coming together to address them. And I'm sure that's the case in your school, Simon.
It is. Do you know what? What's really interesting you said there, Ems, because a lot of pressure was on families to teach maths. And it was the same for me. I'm a teacher, and I've got 2 children, and I was trying to teach my children maths during the day and other lessons as well. And I'm the entertainment at home. I'm usually the climb on daddy, let's roll around. Why is daddy trying to teach us maths? Or what's going on? And I found it difficult as well. And I talked to my parents and I explained that it's been difficult for teachers as well, because at home, I'm the parent, but then I've got to be the teacher. So yeah, it's been very up and down. And I've seen that firsthand as a teacher, as children have come back. And even now, I mean, we're out of pandemic now for what, a few months and a year now, and there's going to be a knock-on effect for a long time. So my next question is this: do you have any insights into strategies and best practices to recover, or even patterns seen in maths in primary learners?
Yeah, now what I can bring to this is my experiences when I've not been teaching in a standard classroom, but I spent some time working in a hospital school. And that meant a lot to me from my own background. And I really wanted to spend some time working with children in a hospital setting. And what we found in the hospital setting is that the children were getting a disrupted education, because some of them were frequently admitted to hospital and some were there for a significant period of time. So in this country and in many countries, we already have experiences of dealing with this and supporting the young children. And it was a twofold attack, which is pretty much what schools are doing at the moment. It was making sure the basics are covered, but also thinking about the young person as a whole and what they need. So yes, you need to know the basics of your maths, your English, your science, but it's those other things that matter. Being resilient. Well, young children recently, you'll find with your year 3-4s, incredibly resilient last couple of years. But collaboration, that's been a key one, getting them working together after so much time at Zoom and being encouraged not to collaborate. So one thing that I learned when I was working in the hospital is to try and develop both at the same time. So it was looking for activities that covered the basics, but also got them engaged, enthusiastic, doing the problem solving and bringing that side out, the curiosity. And that really matters, because our government, our leaders, people who plan our curriculum are heavily influenced by the international OECD PISA studies. And they came out late last year and said there was this very strong positive correlation between curiosity and attainment in maths. So the children who are very curious and asking questions, our primary children by and large, they tend to be the ones, if they harness that curiosity, they then go on and succeed in maths. So it's not just about getting them to solve problems, it's also getting them to pose problems. And one thing that I've been very excited about in recent years with the Enrich team is that we've been looking at that curiosity and how to harness it and the little steps that you take. Because if someone comes into your school and says, perhaps they could be asking more questions, get more curious learners by the next time we come in. How do you do it? How do you move children to asking questions? So looking at strategies like that have been incredibly helpful. And they're ones a lot of us are already using when we teach. So things like what's the same and what's different. So getting them talking first. It's really well used in primary schools. It's a fantastic strategy because you're not putting people under any pressure. You're just talking about what's in front of them. And with primary learners, you could put some numbers in front of them. And the first thing they might talk about is the colour or the font. Let them. And then a really lovely way to get them on task is to say, and what do you think a mathematician might be asking? So let them do the exploration and then move them into thinking how a mathematician works. And then they can start coming up with what it is they would like to be investigating. So they have that little bit of an opportunity to work in a curious way, but it's on something that's curriculum linked that the teacher's chosen. And then one thing we found works really well with schools and with young people is once they've done a task, getting them to reflect on what they did well. And sometimes if you say, do you know what, the class next door are doing this tomorrow. If you were going to give them a bit of advice or help, what's the most important thing you're going to tell them? So they're reflecting, but from a child's point of view. And then to really, really crack it, one thing we know from the research is that to really understand something, it's not about getting the answer, it's about being able to apply it. So if they've solved a problem, can they write a similar problem for someone else and solve that? So they move from being a problem solver to a problem poser. And that's when you've got a really curious learner. It's something that's manageable in the classroom because you're just getting them to change one thing on a problem you've already set and you know. And it addresses that finding from the OECD that more curious learners tend to be higher attainers in maths. We know at primary, curiosity as they go through primary tends to drop. And I think we all know why that might happen. As they're moving through primary and they're getting prepped for things like SATs and times tables tests. So as teachers, we can do a lot. I found it worked really well in the hospital school, choosing these low threshold, high ceiling activities. Everyone can get started, everyone can get stuck, and they can develop the curiosity. So I think those are some of the things that I found have worked really well, Simon. I'm sure there's things that you found yourself teaching your year 3-4s as well that have worked really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole curiosity side of it. It's like harness it, because like you said, so many children for 2 years have been in and out of school and haven't had that collaboration time because they've been at home. And I found as well that some children had lost that social collaboration side because they've just not had experience of it. And they've had different experiences at home. And through mathematics and through that collaboration, what's the same, what's different? We do this in class. We all go like this: what's the same, what's different, what's the same? But we've got like hand signals for it. And we talk about this all the time. It's so interesting you mentioned that. And I think mathematics has been a real vehicle to sort of get children collaborating again and to make mistakes and to be okay with making mistakes, that whole growth mindset side of it. It's just been, I mean, like we've used so many of your challenges to really bring that together and getting children working together and in different groups as well, and working with different abilities because they get a chance to shine and get that curiosity out of them. And it's just, yeah, I love it. It's I'm very passionate about maths, and it's really strange because when I was a kid at primary school, I didn't really like maths because I thought at the time it was a bit stagnant, but it didn't really interest me now. But what we're doing now in maths in primary schools, from my experience, is we're really sort of harnessing that curiosity side and getting them really playing with maths and seeing maths in different areas and not just on certain areas. I find it so interesting. Sorry, Ems, I'm just, you know, I'm kind of forgetting this bit. You know, we're having a chat. I'm just having a full chat. We could be in a bar or in a pub just having a chat about maths, and I could do this all day. But I'm going to get to my next question.
Well, before you get to the next question,
yeah,
just hearing you there, and I think this is such an important point. It's what we need to do as teachers is just to make sure that we're covering the curriculum, so we know we're doing the good things, and we're also seeing that vision that we have for young mathematicians, that they're curious, that they have a really positive attitude, that they want to do the maths. And one thing that I absolutely love about working with the Enrich team is we have those and we see them as 5 strands. So we've got the fluency in there, which is in the curriculum. We've got the understanding. So that's 2 things, but they're not strong enough if we make like a rope out of them to make them secure mathematicians. So alongside the fluency and the understanding, we look for a positive disposition, that they really want to do the activities and that they can reason with them and that they can problem solve and problem pose. So we look for all 5 things. And if you've got those 5 things, we think we're covering the curriculum and what's needed for the SATs, but taking them further. So we're nurturing young mathematicians. And when I'm working on things like that with young people, I feel like I'm really doing something good, because they're not just passing their tests and the expectations, but taking them further and giving those skills that we go into teaching for, that are not just for their social skills, their collaborative skills, but also for economic and for their well-being. I think it's just such an important age that we're thinking about here. And it's lovely to hear the way that you're talking about working with your class, Simon.
Thank you. And I completely agree with everything you said there. Wonderful. Right, I'm going to go to my next question. So what should teachers be focusing on from within the curriculum planning? So at the start, or of the post-pandemic, there was a lot of advice on focus on the basic skills in maths, basic skills, focus on the basic skills. Do you think there's still a need for that, or should we be focusing on the breadth of the back to the pre-pandemic, so how it was before? Or do you think we can learn from these lessons during the pandemic and take these forward going forward?
I think there's always going to be a need for fluency. So whether you look at the curriculum or what we do at Enrich, fluency is non-negotiable, because if you're trying to solve a problem and you're not confident with your numbers and your procedures, then you can get overloaded. And also, if you're not confident, you can't use some of those other essential skills like estimating, using your number sense to know if a number feels right, and to do approximating, which is something as an adult we tend to do more than precise calculations. You work out roughly if you've got enough money at the till. You work out roughly if that rug's going to fit your lounge when you're buying it. You don't always get it right, but that's really important. So developing the number sense and estimating is really key. And that's why I think choosing activities that map to the curriculum, that cover the fluency, is key in the understanding, and cover the other things as well. So one thing that our team's been working on really hard is taking the activities that we have, which you can see is like a pick and mix. You could go on and go, oh, that looks nice, I'm going to do that one with my class. Fantastic. If that's the way you want to work, run with it. But the other thing to be thinking about is covering the curriculum in a way that does these other things that they need, the collaboration, the positive attitude, so that they're engaged and let them reason. So we've taken the activities, we've mapped them to the curriculum. It's free. All teachers have to do is just go to Enrich, click on primary, and the activities are mapped in there. So ideally, I'd love every day in a primary classroom to be a problem-solving day, because at the end of the day, that's why you learn maths. Otherwise, it's like going to football practice. Your coach puts the cones out, you dribble in and out of the cones, and then you go home. And it's, for me, it's like that. Rather than saying, you've dribbled through the cones, you've got the skill, let's go and use it, let's have a practice game and you can go past people there. And for me, learning maths is like that. So you learn your times tables, you learn your number bonds, and now you know them, you can go and have a go at solving these problems, because that's what it's about. We learn the maths so we can use it. It's a tool that we use. So by linking activities to the curriculum and choosing activities from the curriculum map, we know as teachers that we're covering what we need to cover, but also learning those other skills and valuing them that our classes need as they get older, if they're going to be able to contribute to society and have a really good life going forwards, because you need to collaborate. You need to be able to have a positive attitude to learning.
Now, it's interesting you said, because we talked very positively about maths so far, but this is my next question now. So why do you think there's some negative attitudes towards maths? Now, why do you think children can sometimes have this perception that maths isn't for them, or it's not their subject, or I can't do it? And how can we address this as teachers as well as children and parent level? How do we address this?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking earlier, Simon, about your experiences when you were younger. And I think back to some of mine, when sometimes it was just working through a textbook all the time. And it was hard to see why anybody would want to become a mathematician, or even what a mathematician might do. Do they just sit there writing textbooks all day? Because that was my knowledge of it when I was younger. When I see it working really well and the children being engaged with their maths, it's because they can see the point to doing it. They might be doing it because they're having fun, or it's helping them solve a problem, such as sorting out the school sports day, or organising lessons and where children sit in the dinner hall. They can see a point to doing it. So having stuff that's fun and having a point to doing it is really important, but that's only half of it. Because when we're in school, they're getting the messages from us. When they go home and into the community, they may be getting different messages. And I know that every month or so on my Twitter feed, someone will have said something in advertising or on TV, which is a negative attitude towards maths. They're out there in the community. And I think part of our role is to stand up to those, to flag them up, to challenge them. And then when we're in school and we're organising events, working actively with the parents. And we've done one project which was just slightly above primary. It was year 7, so children who just left primary, and we were looking at doing more parental engagement. And there's so many ways parents can support with maths. You can have a really good place to work together at home. You can check homework diaries. You can follow up that it's been done. But we looked at it differently. We looked at parents and children doing maths together. And we were choosing activities which didn't involve the parents teaching anything because it'd been taught in class. Activities where you could apply the skills. So you could use your number skills on a times table challenge or your number bonds on a different challenge. And what we found through those projects was that the children were spending more time working with their parents, and the parents were enjoying it and wanting to get the children to do the maths as well. So partly it's down to us what we do in school, I'd suggest, and it's partly bringing along the families with us, organising events and opportunities where they can see the way that we deliver maths nowadays and why we do it that way, that it can be fun and that it can be useful. So those messages go home.
Thank you, Ems. You know, because I'm just thinking back to my class. So with what you said there, I think teachers have got to be enthusiastic about maths as well, because they feed, like, kids notice everything. I've got a new haircut. I hope you like it. I had it done a couple of days ago. Guaranteed, when I go in on Monday, every single kid will go, "Miss Dunn, have you got your hair like different?" And teachers won't notice. If we have a new pair of shoes on and they notice everything, so they'll also spot when you're not enthusiastic about something. So we decided at the beginning, we decided together, I lead them to this decision, but we changed mathematicians to mathematicians to give maths that magic side of it, because we talk about playing with numbers, how maths is magic. So we now become, when we do maths, we're all mathematicians. I'll go, come on, Isla, you're a mathematician, we can do this. And that's, I think it really, really works. And it adds that sort of that pedestal. It puts maths right up there. So I should really copyright that. You know, I'm gonna look into that. I don't know whether anyone's done that. I'm gonna have a look later on. But yeah, mathematicians. And so this leads me to the next question. So maths is a core subject throughout the curriculum. So how do you think maths contributes to other key areas of the curriculum, and how can we make it more visible in the classrooms? Because I talk to my children that maths isn't just that 1 hour or what every day we do, that it's everywhere. You've just got to see it. So how do you think we can make it more visible in the classroom?
Oh, what a lovely approach to be taking, looking at cross-curricular maths. I mean, I'm thinking, let's suppose we've got them lined up, we're taking them into the hall, we're going to do a PE lesson, we've got maybe 30 children taking part. How are we going to split them into teams? Is it going to work if we put you into teams of 4? Is it going to work if we put you into teams of 6? Little examples like that, bringing it into everyday work, is a lovely way of doing it. But the thing that I found worked best, if we're looking at cross-curricular approaches, is to actually take that step back and look at our medium and long-term plans. So if I'm thinking what I might be teaching in science next year with year 3/4s, and I might be doing some healthy bodies in the summer, getting out and about, exercising, thinking about our pulse and our breathing, all those sorts of things. That involves a lot of measures. So if I think about what I'm teaching, maybe Easter time or just as we're about to go into the summer in maths, and I'm covering some of these measuring things, then I've got a really good opportunity to do some assessments when we go outside. So it could be some measures on how far they're throwing, converting different units, but then they can see what I've done in the classroom fits in with what we're doing outside in PE and in science. So that way I found worked really well, but it did mean that at this time of year, when I'm thinking about next year's classes, I was having to get out all of my medium-term plans and say, right, what maths is there coming up in PE? Well, I've got sports day is an obvious one. There's putting people into groups. Where does it come in the science lessons? Oh, we've got shadow measuring coming up. We might be looking at the height of trees in the park, and going through all the medium-term plans, finding when they happen, and then going back to my maths plan and thinking, right, this is when I'm going to teach the skills in maths. And then later on, this is when they link in with my other subject. That's going to give me a chance to follow it up, because we know we need the repetition. And it gives me a bit of a chance for an assessment. But crucially for my children, they can see why I did this in the maths lesson, because now they're going away and using it and applying it and making sure I bring that out to them. You know, do you remember when we did this in class? Do you remember when we were trying to measure the length of the desk and the rulers weren't long enough, and we're having to look at getting meter sticks rather than 30-centimetre rulers, putting them all next to each other and getting the wrong measure? Done that with my year 3/4s, looked at meter sticks, looked at longer measures, looked at estimating. So what I used to do when I was working with my local authority and local teachers is we used to do this as something that we looked at in the summer term. We would sit down and get out those medium-term plans for next year and just go through and look at all the opportunities in the different subjects. And then we went back to our maths planning and thought, where do we pre-teach them? And use the cross-curricular to bring that alive. And likewise, your geography teachers, your history teachers, can they find opportunities to make those links backwards and forwards? It is a great opportunity for people to sit down together and plan together. But also for us as teachers, when we've taught something, to actually see them going outside and estimating how far they might throw that beanbag and then measuring it and then coming back and going, oh, I was within 50 centimetres of it. That's just fantastic when you see them getting so excited about what they're doing. So that's an approach that I found works really well. It's worked for me. I found it great when I was a subject leader in school for making meaningful links, because otherwise you're teaching something, you're already into the term, and you think, oh, I could have done that in such an order. Week to week, it's really hard to do. But if we just take that step back and look at medium-term plans, in my experience and working with colleagues, I found that really helpful. Simon, I don't know, how do you go about it in your own school?
So, I mean, in my school, we obviously with our medium-term plans, we look for, well, what links can we have? Now, this was, let me think now, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were looking at perimeter, okay? And I think you've got to have the confidence as a teacher to go, right, let's go with something a little bit different, and let's just give it a try. And, you know, it might work really well. And if it does, it works amazingly well. And if it doesn't, you learn from it, you move on, and then you adapt it for next time. So we were in my classroom's really small. It's quite small. It's quite rectangular, quite small. It gets really, really warm. And it just so happened there was like a builder looking at the roof outside my classroom. So he was just looking at the roof and he was talking with the head teacher. And I said, did you know what they're doing? My class was like, no, what they're doing, Mr. Dunn? I said, well, I have asked for an extension. I'd love an extension outside this class, but we've only got a perimeter. I can't remember what the perimeter said, perimeter wall to play with. How do you think it could look and link to my classroom? So what we did is we all went outside, we looked at the perimeter, I said, right, what have we got to play with? And we drew in chalk what shape we would like it. We had to go back because it was too big or too small. And then when we made our extension to our classroom, we thought, right, what if we had a budget, what would we like to, you know, we've got an empty space here. So we're doing maths there, we're addition, subtraction, we're looking at numbers, we're estimating, like you said earlier, we're estimating, well, if we've got about £1,000 here, we can't go and spend £900 on this PC that Mr. Hunt really, really wants. We've got to buy some chairs and other things. And we did this outside. Now to them, they would have gone home and said, mum or dad would have said, what did you do? What did you do at school today? Mr. Hunt was making us do some blueprint plans for his extension in his classroom. But actually, there's a bit of camouflage learning there. They were doing addition, subtraction, estimating. They were looking at perimeter. They were looking at area as well. They did all this other type of stuff. And that's what, as a teacher, you've got to have the confidence to be able to do this. And you will see it. And the more you do it, the more you'll get back from the kids, and you'll see it. And then they'll get excited and they go, let's be mathematicians again. Let's do something else. And then, you know, and then I can go with these blueprints to my head teacher and then go, all right, Mr. Holden, you know, can you come into school, class and say, oh, we're just a bit budget-wise, we're struggling a little bit. Let's write a persuasive letter now. And then we're going to English. Let's write a persuasive letter to our head teacher. We really, really need this extension. So there's so many links there. And that's what maths really, really does. And it's something, like I said before, it's called camouflage learning, when the kids don't realize it's happening. But that's sometimes when the best learning happens, when the kids are having fun, exploring, making mistakes, and just enjoying math. And if we ever do need an extension, I've got blueprints there, perfectly fantastic blueprints that I can then give to head teachers. Say, it's already designed for you. There you go. Stick an extension on the end of my classroom. But yeah, that's
you know what, that reminds me, I'm thinking year threes here, and we were doing the Vikings, which is probably something you've taught many times.
Subjects. I love.
We were reading about them, and somewhere along the line in the text it said the longship was 30 meters long. I could just see them. It was just going over their heads.
Yeah. How big is that?
It was just numbers. So we went out into the playground, and I just said to them, so how long do you think 30 meters is? And get yourselves like into pairs, like you're going to be rowing. And we just acted the whole thing out. We worked out how long this ship would be, which was, you know, the length of our playground. But then a few weeks later, it was coming up to the end of the year, and we were looking back at all the things we'd done over the year. And I just asked them to write down for each subject the most memorable thing they'd done. And they said in maths, it was when we went outside and we actually thought about what we were reading, and we acted out the longship and realised how long they were. And it kind of blew them away when they went out there. And just making these links, and like you say, the camouflage maths, they don't even realise they're doing it at the time. But later on, when they're asked to reflect, that was one of the things they said was the highlight of the year, just going out there, stopping reading the book and saying, you know, what does that mean? Let's go and have a think about it. They love doing that.
Sorry, I'm making sure this is recording because I'm going to do that with my class. I'm definitely 100% going to do that one. 30 meters, yes, fantastic. Right, okay, I'm making notes in my own medium-term plan here now already. All right, so my kids are 7, 8, and 9. That's the age of my children. How do I team my children up so in the future they want to be a mathematician, or they want to have a career in maths, or maybe one day they could be the next Ems Lord and be working with Enrich? What can I do, or what can we do as teachers to try to encourage that, so when they go up, they've got this person or this thing they want to look up to, they want to get to, this destination they want to reach?
I think the main thing we can be is role models. So, I mean, it sounds like everything that you're talking about, Simon, it's the sort of thing we need to be doing. So when we walk into the classroom, we're bringing it to their attention. So it could be, you know, we've got some new box of books has just arrived. Do you think they're going to fit on the shelves? Are they the right height, width? Or, you know, we're going to get on the school bus, we're going swimming. How many seats do we need? How many buses do we need? So they don't make those daft mistakes of maybe saying, well, we need 3.2 buses to get us on the school trip. It's like, you can't order 2.2 of a bus. You've done the calculation, but it's not real life. All the time, going into the hall for PE, getting into pairs, is there going to be one left over? How do you know? All those discussions, constantly bringing it alive. But there's one thing I love. You talked about the mathematicians, which is lovely. And in the research, Kuoko, who's really important to our team, because Kuoko's team talks about habits of mind, ways mathematicians work and how we can do that in the classroom. And they talk about encouraging the children to be investigators, tinkerers. But one thing they talk about that I love more than anything is pattern sniffers. And it is something I know works well with primary children. It's encouraging them to be pattern sniffers. They love it. So it can be looking at the railings in the playground and noticing how often they repeat, or the paving slab designs, or when we're going into the hall, how long the rows tend to be. If you're good at spotting patterns, then you're working mathematically all the time, and you're becoming curious because you start looking for them in the environment. It's like doing a maths trail every day when you go to school and you come home. What do you notice about the numbers on the doors that we're passing? What do you notice about the garden fence panels? How many panels has that garden got? How many panels have they got? Wonder what they cost to put their panels up. All the time looking and asking questions. So if we can get them to be curious because we're curious, I think that's the way forward. And one thing that I found fascinating to do is to ask a child, a classroom of children, to draw themselves doing maths. Because I might think that my class think a certain way about maths, but finding out what they think, because they've had different teachers and different experiences, and seeing what they draw. And sometimes, despite my best efforts, they'll draw themselves by themselves, sat at a table doing maths. And that really makes me focus on, okay, so how do I change this? Because for maths, for me, it's not about sitting at a table working by myself. It's about working together. It's about sharing ideas. So the more things that we can do there, talking about maths together, doing group activities and celebrating those and sharing ideas, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, they just think that maths is, you learn your numbers, you learn your procedures, you do your GCSE, and you never need to do maths again. It finishes in June of your GCSE year. But that isn't it. That's the start. When you've done your GCSEs, you've got the skills, and you go off and use it to do the things that you want. So if we can talk to them and we can act in the way that we think mathematicians are, people who are curious, who work together and really enjoy the subject and talking about it, and get the children to be pattern sniffers. They love the term, and once they've learnt it, they do not stop showing you patterns you may never have even noticed. The carpets, the walls, the ceiling, what's in the pea basket, they keep spotting it. But if they're doing that, they're putting those very early seeds in of early algebra. Get that right, and we've got young mathematicians of the future.
I love that sorry, the pattern sniffers, I thought, right, I am 100% going to do that next week. Because my kids, when I do work, so I work 4 days a week, and on the other day I do lots of other things. I consult all different types of stuff. And they said, Mr. Hunt, what are you doing this week? And I said, well, I'm going to speak. So that's why we've got some questions for you later on. I'm going to speak to a mathematician. And I knew some of them had an idea what's a mathematician look like? Who is this person? So we looked at your website, and then some of my kids came back the next day and they said it was Eilish. She said, Mr. Hunt, you do know she's very, very clever. I was like, oh no, I'm very aware of that, don't worry. She said, make sure you ask some good questions, Mr. Hunt. So I said, right, I'll do my best. But I think now, and for her to see you, to put a person, she's like, well, she's very clever. And I said, well, she does this, she does all these different types of things, all those enriched things that we use. She works for that. And I said, you could do that in the future. And I think we've got to give as teachers, we have footballers, we have these faces to certain sports and activities and things, but we need faces for mathematicians like yourself as well. We need these faces so children can go, I want to be the next Dr. Ems Lord, which Isla has, by the way. She has a good question for you later on. She has the potential to do that. So yeah, it's really, really great to see. Now, going to my next question. So this happens in class all the time. Some of my kids know that Mr. Hunt talk about something random, you'll forget that he's supposed to be teaching. I know they know this happens. I'm very aware of it.
They realize that we're teaching because we're kind of modeling that curiosity that they need.
Exactly. And I also know that they think that that's what they're doing, but really they're not. I'm leading it. Really, they just think that Mr. Hunt's going off on a tangent. But those are usually the best lessons. And I'm going off on a tangent now, and none of my kids are there to say, Mr. Hunt, stop that. So I'm going to stop myself. Right. So how do you think us teachers need to adapt to the development gaps that we're noticing? So should we have what should our approach be? Do you think we should have because is it all the in-class interventions, out-of-class interventions? What are your thoughts? Because I've seen before when children, and it breaks my heart sometimes when I've seen this before in teaching. I'm sure you've seen this when children have to go out in an intervention in the afternoon and miss a subject that they really enjoy, and they're getting taken out of the classroom, and then that further gives that negative impact to mathematics. So what are your thoughts? What would you suggest?
I've been there exactly the same. It breaks your heart when you see children having multiple interventions, and this isn't just in primary school. This goes right through, and quite often when we're trying to support children, the very well-being that we're trying to offer them, it can backfire because they get intervention overload, they miss a lot of other things, and the gaps stay there. So an alternative way of doing it is to allow for the fact that the children have maybe bumpy experiences, and they might need intervention on one thing and not another. So if we give them activities which I would call low threshold, high ceiling, that's not something I've come up with. It comes from the world of computer science and the work of Seymour Papin. So anybody who's old enough to use things like Lego turtles in schools and program them on playgrounds to draw shapes, it's the same idea behind that. It's about giving children things that they can get started on easily. So everybody's together and learning together, but then you have that very high ceiling. So the children who have got those basic things can go off and be stretched. They can all work together and practice and develop and share ideas.
I completely agree. And again, it further adds to that negative thing, because usually some of the children that love sports are then taken out of the subject that they really enjoy, and then it's a lose-lose, but having the whole class to do it together. And also, it's that inclusivity side of it. So children know why they're being taken out. They realize that, am I being taken out because I couldn't do that thing this morning? And even by 3-4, they're aware of it. In year 1, 2, reception, even, they know that this is happening. And again, that's that negative side of it. But if we do it together as a class, maybe we could, we could think of it a little bit differently as a whole group. Let's do it together, and let's do it. Yeah, I completely agree with that, 100%. Now, we've been talking about support for kids, but what support is there, or should there be, or what does it need to look like for teachers and for educators? What are your thoughts there?
I was lucky enough a few years ago to join the Maths Specialist Teacher Programme. And for colleagues who've not come across that before, it was a government-funded initiative that made sure that every primary school, this was the aim, make sure that every primary school, the teachers have access to someone who's been trained up to a higher level of maths, up to master's level. So they've got a really good idea of primary into secondary. I love that project because it was a 2-year programme, so it really valued class teachers. a 2-year program. And in that 2 years, it looked at doing something in your class, working with a colleague, and doing a whole school project. And I think any initiatives like that, where it isn't you go out for a day, you've done all the planning for your supply cover, you do something for a day, you come back to your classroom the next day, you're sorting out all the things that happened before, you're trying to do a bit of catch up, and you've returned with a list of things that you really liked the day before in the course, but real life cuts in and there's no chance to do any of it. But you've had a day out and someone's invested it. It's not been cheap. And I've always felt guilty after that I've had the opportunity and not the chance to embed it. But if we could get school governors really on board when they're working with head teachers, because they're the ones who are there to challenge, we get the math school governors to be talking with the leadership team and saying, right, how are we doing PD in school? Are we investing long term? So teachers get to work together maybe on something like lesson study or math specialist teachers. So they get regular opportunities to have time away from the classroom, to work together on things that they know need working on, not something necessarily that central government has said, but something that your school needs or your teachers need, and the time to work on it, and it's ring fenced. And that's followed up. So the governing body know what's happening and that the teachers are getting that. Because it's one thing to have a lovely PD budget, but it's about actually having that quality time. So as teachers, we can talk about what the issues are, have time to explore different ways forward, such as lesson study, which I think is a lovely approach, and then time to reflect on it. And one thing that I think is lovely from the Japanese approach is they say that when a teacher retires, their learning is not lost because they do lesson study and it gets through and is shared with the following generations. And that idea that we work together and we share what we're doing, I think is invaluable. So certainly at Enrich, we try to offer every half term free webinars for teachers. So every half term you can come, work on stuff, come back, talk to us about it. It's that long-term commitment. And I think if schools could make that commitment to maths, it gives us chance as professionals to go away and do maths. We did an event the other day, and the teacher said the best thing for them was they had an hour doing maths. And I don't think that's something that can be overlooked too easily, that we get that chance to re-engage with doing maths ourselves, get our enthusiasm up, get our curiosity up. So we go back into the classroom and we're engaged. So I think for me, just making sure that colleagues such as yourself have those regular opportunities and that the school are held to account, that they are actually happening. And there's people checking what's going on, that money's being well invested. Because with the maths programme, one thing the head teachers told us is when they invested in the teachers that way, the teachers stayed in school for longer. So it was actually a really good investment. So you've got a really great maths lead and you invest in them to do the training and share it in school, chances are they'll stay in school longer. So you haven't got all those recruitment needs as well and the disruption to your school. So it makes sense for the schools, but as an individual, if the governing body and the school are saying, we're going to pay you so you can go on this course, you can have this release time, that's fantastic. Rather than you've got half a day next week, we're going to try and get you some supply cover and you come back all frazzled. I've never found that a good way forward, because I've always felt at the end frustrated because I haven't had a chance to follow it through. So for me, it's about those regular opportunities and it being valued. I mean, Simon, how do you like to go about it?
So I completely agree with what you said there, and it mirrors what we mentioned to do with the children earlier. So the whole collaboration side of it. So we've been really focused on collaboration with children because they've had 2 years out of the classroom, but teachers have had the exact same thing, 2 years out of the classroom, teaching from home. I'm not having experience for the past 2 years with the teachers that I work with and using their knowledge. So getting back together now teacher training and PD, like you mentioned, is happening. I went to a CPD session not that long ago, and I was like, gosh, I'm in a room full of teachers again, just talking about, it wasn't math at the time, but just talking about, teaching and having that experience, because we've kind of lost that. I mean, we had Zoom sessions, but the actual physical nature of collaborating and going, let's go and do something over there. And so we have a great maths lead at our school, Mr. Groutidge. I'm going to name drop him because he might just watch this, I'm sure. But so he's been doing a lot of research and he's bringing back some research back to us. And then we've had, like we said, those creative math lessons, we've done that in a staff meeting rather than showing a PowerPoint of we could get our children to do this, this, and this. is gone, right, well, here's some straws, let's make a straw. We've done stuff like that, so we're actually doing it. And the amount of fun, like as teachers, we're kind of big kids anyway, but to actually experience and do it yourself, then when you give it to the kids, you go, we did that with Mr. Groucher the other week, and we did that with Mrs. Hopkins the other week. And they're, oh, did you? Like, what if you can beat the teacher? That's always a good one. Beat the teacher. We got to this, and I'll show pictures or videos. And I think it's that collaborating and just being able to speak to teachers. And then also, there's lots of really knowledgeable teachers that have had so much experience that until you speak to that person or that teacher, you might never know that they've got this background in maths or this background in another subject. And that's why we have to stop, collaborate, and listen, as the song goes. But I think it's so important. Again, we're expecting children to collaborate. As teachers, we've got to do the same as well. It was nice to socialize with teachers and just have a chat, and it's been great. And I think that's the way forward. Collaborate 100%. I completely agree with you there. Got a few more questions before I get to some really, really important questions as well, from some top experts. But my next question is this: so how do you think approaches need to be adapted to create a more inclusive learning environment? Because I've seen this through school now. We've had children with additional needs and different needs because of the pandemic and just because of the increase in general. So what can we do to create an inclusive learning environment for the children?
Very good question. And it is a challenge on how you set up a classroom for everybody, because everybody matters. But then as a teacher, you always feel that pressure of, am I doing enough for each individual child? I remember sitting down, looking at my planning and thinking it through from each child's point of view. Have I got it right for them? And sometimes it became madness because I was planning all this differentiation because I wanted to do my best by them. But part of it comes down to the classroom environment, and can everybody access everything they need, or are they having to ask for it? Because that can be one of the barriers. You have to ask to get something. It's an extra barrier to engaging. So one thing that we did working within the LA, when we had teachers who were doing some fantastic work in their maths lessons, but were wanting to go further. And what we did in schools was we buddied teachers up. It was that collaboration idea again. We got them to buddy up and go and visit each other's classrooms because they had that fresh pair of eyes. And one thing they said was, we hardly ever get to go into each other's classes. It's like our classroom, and we close the door and then we go in the staff room. But we don't tend to have colleagues in our classrooms very often. But we got them to look around and say, so from a maths point of view, what help and support can you see around the room? What resources can you get to really, really easily? And if you're finding it difficult, what is it you would want to have? Can you see the times table square from where you're sat? Can you get those cubes that you want to get? And when you're looking at the activities we've done this week, do you think you'd be able to access them all? The other thing that also works really nicely is school councils and asking the children what's working really well and letting the children put forward their ideas of what would make it easier for them. Sometimes the question of, if we could change one thing, just one thing about your classroom that would make your maths lessons even better, what would it be? And those could be really powerful ways to change, because sometimes I don't even realise that something's a problem till someone says, do you know what, you've put that times table thing by the cupboard, but when you're teaching, you quite often open the cupboard to get resources and nobody can see it. And I'm like, I never realised that. I thought it was up there and accessible, but actually it wasn't. And so having that challenge from the children as well, and having colleagues come in and look at the rooms, some of those approaches, and it's coming back to collaboration, I found to be incredibly helpful. And the other thing that's been really helpful is getting people in from different key stages. So just speaking with the foundation stage people and how they get things set up so everybody can join in, is valued, and what works well for them. And then thinking, okay, what can I learn from them? That's been something else that I found helpful. I did a stint teaching in a nursery at one point, and I picked up so many things that I just hadn't realised would be helpful in my teaching, even just the resources at break time, the way they organise them. So talking with people from the earlier year groups, that for me was really, really helpful, Simon.
I completely agree as well, because it's what I've noticed in primary from reception, children are very hands-on with their maths, and the older you get, that seemed to in some cases sort of disappear a little bit. It's more, as you say, paper based. So we learn, children learn best through play, just like we said with the perimeter lesson, and through playing with maths. And that's what happens in reception. And I think going to reception teachers again, sharing that collaboration, sharing that knowledge, we could then take some of those approaches to help the learners in our classroom that might really, really need that sort of reception and nursery approach within your classroom. But also there'll be other children that will also be able to learn from that approach as well, that you might not necessarily have thought of before. So I think it's such an important thing. And also, like you said, the pupil voice, ask kids, because they'll be brutally honest and they'll tell you. So we've completely changed the way we teach in our school. We've got something called unchained teaching. So generally teachers usually stand at the front of the classroom and teach sort of this way, kind of like theatre style. And the way we teach now is we kind of stand in the middle of the classroom. Because the reason why is because you can be in and amongst the children. We mirror iPads, we use technology and stuff. And the reason why that started is because it was during a coordinates lesson. So it's a math lesson. I asked one of my children to answer the question. She had to stand up because she couldn't see the axes at the bottom to see the numbers going across. And I had this on video and I said, why did you stand up? She said, I can't see at the bottom. I was like, all right, how come you never said? And she said, well, you've never asked me before, Mr. Hunt, whether I can see at the bottom. You just presume things. And then we then got into the conversation how she couldn't always hear everything I'm going to say. So it kind of got me thinking about do you know when you go to the theatre and the expensive seats are really at the front, because those are the expensive seats, because they're near the screen and they're near the sound. But the further back you go, the cheaper the seats get. So in theory, I at the time we had classrooms with cheap seats, so children sat at the back, they couldn't see as well, they couldn't hear as well. So we've changed our classroom, we've completely changed our learning environment, and the children have really come along. And we have these aids now, where as teachers we talk, and our voice goes through all the way around the classroom. So wherever we're stood, our voice goes through the classroom, and you can talk in your normal teacher voice, and it fills the classroom with sound. And it's and this is because of seeing a child standing up and talking to the children, which brings me to my next three questions. Dr. Ems, are you ready for this? Now, I thought I had three more questions. I could speak to experts from around the world, but I've got luckily 31 very knowledgeable experts on the year 3-4 primary in mathematics classroom. I've got three questions. So this was Isla. Her question is this. She said, can you ask her? This is exactly what she said. Can you ask the doctor, because he called you the doctor, can you ask the doctor why maths is so important? So how important is maths really?
I've got to say, Isla, thank you for a fantastic question. Okay, Isla, for me, maths is so important because it's what unlocks everything else. It helps me if I want to go running and get faster because I can time my splits. It helps me organise my money so I know how much I've got or how much I haven't got. It helped me make my house into a home because I could organise everything. It helps me get my schedule. It helps me catch my trains. It helps me go out in the evening. Everything that I want to do, I can do better because I can use my maths. So I'm not late. I don't tend to run out of money, and I can do things because I get my scheduling right. So it helps me all the way through. And one thing I like, keep working hard at your maths. Okay. Great question. Thank you.
Fantastic, Ems. And I've got two more. This is from Leo. He's one of my year 4 children. He said, we tried the Enrich Make 37 challenge the other week. Why did you make it impossible for them to do it? He wants to know this.
Leo, thank you for your question, and thank you for your efforts on that particular question. Do you know what? When you're a mathematician or a scientist, it's about asking questions. I wonder if, and sometimes we don't always get the answer that we expect. And that's why we do experiments, and that's why we research, because we're learning. And part of learning is that sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes things can't be done. But what you do is you learn why it couldn't be done. And with that particular activity, Make 37, it was a great opportunity for your class, for Mr. Hunt's class, to use their pattern sniffing skills, because I'm guessing when you were looking at it and you're thinking, why it doesn't work, it's because you were looking very carefully at those numbers and were pattern sniffing your knowledge of odds and evens. And so that's why it's in there, because it's a really important thing to understand that we can't always do everything, but there are reasons, and it's using your maths to understand why things can be done and sometimes why they can't be done. Thanks for the question, Leo.
Thanks, Ems. And Leo, this is for you. I told you that's why, but I said I'd ask the doctor just to clarify. Right, I've got one last question for you. This is Max. Now, you know Max is a bit random in school, but that's why I love Max. And he said, what's your favourite shape? And what's your favourite number and why?
Max, you are a star. Okay, I could talk about this for hours. My favourite shape is a football, okay, a sphere. But if you actually look at the football, it's made of panels. And the maths you need to get those different shapes on your football together is fascinating. The people at all these football companies, it's one of their major research projects, and they're trying to get more panels on to make it even rounder. Because you think of a sphere as perfectly round, look at a football, it's stitched together, it isn't quite there. And it's really important the way football moves through the air. And if you look at a road sign for a football stadium and you look at the shape they put on there and the little shapes inside it, you might find something interesting when you compare them to a real football. So for me, a football brings the whole thing together. My curiosity about why they have that symbol on the road sign compared to what a football's like. My excitement for this is a major research area for companies on designing better footballs. And as a mathematician, understanding how those shapes go together when we patch them together to make a football. The whole thing comes alive for me and why I study maths, because not only is it a great subject, it can also help make us all better footballers too. Max, great question.
Thank you so much, Ems. And do you know what? He did actually tell me it doesn't have to be a 2D shape this one. It can be a 3D shape. So great that you answered it that way. Thank you so much, Ems. I'm going to leave it with Max because like I said, I could talk to you all day long and I really could, but thank you so much. You give us so many little nuggets of advice there. The pattern sniffing straight next week, I'm definitely going to do that, and lots of different ideas there, and I hope anyone that listens to this gets lots of ideas. Goes to Enrich, give your kids the Make 37 challenge. It's one of my favorite ones because they always get so close. They get to 38, they get to 36, but it's really interesting task to show how there's not always an exact answer, but why can't we can't use what we know to find out what we don't. So why can't we make 37? And it's such an interesting approach. And thank you so much, Ems. It's been really nice to talk to you, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Simon, thank you so much. Thank you for hosting. I've got to say a huge thank you to Mr. Hunt's class. Brilliant questions. And I'm really hoping that you guys have a look at our life problems, send in your ideas, and I'm looking forward to next time I go on Enrich, seeing some published on the website, some of your ideas. That will be fantastic. Thank you very much for having me today.